The sterile air of the courtroom felt colder than any winter night as Dr. Reese Hayes sat slumped in his chair, shoulders hunched and hands trembling slightly at his sides, the muted murmur of spectators swelling into a cacophony of unspoken judgments. Only days before, he had been a beacon of calm professionalism at Forrester Creations Gala, clad in crisp scrubs beneath his suit coat, the picture of medical authority. Until the crack of gunfire had ripped through the celebration and left him fighting for his life in an operating room not his own. Now, pale under the harsh fluorescent lights, he faced a diagnosis that struck deeper than any bullet, a rare, blood-borne pathogen transmitted by tainted fragment, one that carried the specter of chronic illness, stigma, and endless treatments. His gaze flicked to the judge's bench, then to the gallery where Steffy Forrester sat poised like a warrior queen, arms folded and lips curved in an expression scarcely distinguishable from triumph. Mere weeks ago, she had stood at his side as he stitched her wounds, voiced reassurances that his surgical skill would save her from the bullet lodged in her ribs. Now she accused him of reckless negligence, alleging that in the chaos of the shooting he had failed to follow protocol, contaminated his gloves, and contaminated her blood while repairing her tissue. An assertion that threatened to unravel not only his career but his very reputation. Across the aisle, Dr. Li Shin's jaw clenched, his dark eyes ablaze as he rose to deliver his own retort. That Steffy's obsession with Luna's betrayal had driven her from Mount Olympus of motherhood, leaving her infant daughter vulnerable while she chased phantom enemies. "Miss Forrester," Lee had begun, voice low and steady, "your counsel would have you believe that a practiced surgeon, trained for decades, could commit such a flagrant breach of safety in the heat of saving your life. Yet I remind this court that on the night of the shooting, your priorities lay elsewhere. You abandoned your child's nursery, your cries of vengeance guiding your steps away from maternal duty." The courtroom had trembled at his words, a collective intake of breath, as Steffy's face flushed a furious red and she leaned forward to whisper something venomous to her attorney. Only a fraction of an hour later, Finn, Dr. John Finnegan, once lauded as one of the most compassionate pediatric neurosurgeons in Los Angeles, had been dragged before the bench under a writ compelling his testimony. The same hands that once cradled newborns in his arms wielded scalpels with the precision that saved lives on the delicate frontier between life and death, now shook at his sides as he stood and faced the prosecutor's questioning. "Doctor," the prosecutor intoned, "did you observe any lapse in Dr. Hayes' surgical protocol following the moment he treated Miss Forrester's injuries? Were gloves changed, instruments sterilized?" Finn's throat tightened. The very act of speaking felt like betraying his mentor and friend. Behind him, in the gallery reserved for family, Steffy's eyes burned with conflicted fire, angry at Hayes, yet pained by the thought of Finn sacrificing his own child's welfare by testifying. If Finn's words lent credence to negligence, he risked losing custody of his son Hayes Finn, a child named in honor of the very man on trial. And yet, if Finn remained silent or recanted under oath, he would commit perjury, shattering his medical license and moral integrity. The judge's gavel rapped once, twice, and Finn heard it echo deep within his chest as if sealing his fate. Outside, the day's glare fell like judgment upon the marble steps, where paparazzi's lenses snapped relentlessly, whispers of liability, malpractice, and custody battle circulating like wildfire. The Spencer Forrester feud, always a private saga of love and power, had erupted into public scandal, exposing fractures in family loyalties that no amount of designer couture could conceal. Meanwhile, in a private hallway beyond the courtroom, Dr. Lee cornered Steffy as she emerged, eyes flashing with both accusation and sympathy. "You brought this on yourself," he hissed. "If you'd been where you belonged with your daughter, Hayes would be healthy, and this trial would never have happened." Steffy's composure faltered for a heartbeat, her mascara-run cheeks betraying her hardness, and she lashed back, Don't you dare lecture me about parenting when you were too busy decorating your private clinic to check on a dying woman. You and your pristine reputation. What good is all that if you can't even protect your patient from infection? Her words hung in the corridor, a pair of knives finding their mark. Lee's lips tightened into a hard line, but before he could reply, Finn appeared at the far end, gait cautious yet determined. The moment stretched, a tableau of three souls caught between duty, anger, and fear. Finn's voice, when he spoke, came as a whisper but carried the weight of inevitability. I have to testify. For Hayes' sake, for Steffy's sake, for truth. The trial resumed at dawn the next day, the courtroom draped in oppressive silence as Finn took the stand. His uniform, a crisp white coat, felt like armor he donned too hastily. Beneath it, he felt as exposed as a newborn under the surgeon's lamp. He recounted his observations with clinical detachment, the medical team's protocols, the chain of custody for instruments, the moments he'd glimpsed Hayes scrub in with haste. He spoke of the chaos following the explosion, the override of certain safety checks, and the presence of minute blood-borne contaminants that could only have originated from an unsterile breach. Each uttered detail was a scalpel cutting through the fragile tissue of friendships and alliances. Steffy watched, face rigid, as Finn's testimony painted the portrait of procedural lapse. Lee, across the room, clenched his hands into fists, the echo of Finn's words both vindication and lament. And at the defense table, Bill Spencer, who had financed the Forrester Gala, brokered peace deals, commanded boardrooms, sat stone-faced, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, but his brow revealed the silent storm within. The court recessed for lunch, but the storm was far from quelled. As attorneys huddled over evidentiary charts, family members clustered in tense groups. Rich consoling Brooke, Katie whispering to Donna, all grappling with the fallout of a chain reaction triggered by a single, fateful decision to chase vengeance instead of cradle an infant. Word leaked that afternoon of Lee's countersuit for wrongful indictment, adding a new layer of complexity, allegations that Steffy's public accusations had destroyed his practice's reputation and risked patients' trust. Steffy's mother-in-law, Taylor, herself no stranger to courtroom drama, approached her with a trembling apology, but Steffy could only shake her head, tears finally spilling, not solely for the trial's toll, but for the child whose fragile life had spurred this catastrophe. The prosecutor rose again, citing Finn's testimony to demand punitive damages, revocation of Hayes' medical license, and joint custody hearings to determine whether Finn, compromised by scandal, remained fit to parent. As opening statements for the next phase of litigation began, Finn slumped in his seat, awareness of how each word he had spoken could tip the scale against his own parental rights pressing into his chest like a vice. The judge, steepling her fingers, reminded all parties that beyond the legal labyrinth lay the human cost, Steffy's infant daughter, Bill's legacy of influence, Lee's career and reputation, and Finn's irrevocable choice between physician's oath and father's love. The clerk called the next witness, but the tension that filled the space was heavier than any gavel strike, an unspoken question hanging in the hush. In a world where the pursuit of justice collides with the bonds of family, who emerges unscathed? And as the lip of the courtroom door swung open, Finn glanced up, eyes meeting Steffy's through the woodgrain, each conveying a measure of apology and understanding that transcended the courtroom's sterile confines. Outside, cameras flashed, but inside, a quieter drama played out, the relentless collision of professional duty, personal vendetta, and parental devotion, each demanding sacrifice, each unwilling to yield. In that crucible, every verdict rendered would be more than a matter of law. It would be a reckoning of hearts and souls forever changed by one bullet, one virus, and the choices made in the aftermath. Steffy's hand tightened around Hayes' as they rolled their suitcases through the sleek terminal of LAX, the cold November dawn light slanting through the soaring glass walls like a promise of escape. Behind them, a phalanx of cameras and whispers trailed their airstep into the private jet waiting on the tarmac, machines that back home had judged them, dissected their every choice, weighed physicians' ethic against mother's devotion, parents' loyalty against legal oath. Here, though, the hum of the turbine engines drowning out all, but the beat of their hearts offered a measure of sanctuary. Even as each knew that France's most cutting-edge virology center in Paris would demand nothing less than every ounce of courage and resilience they could muster. When the last of the paparazzi turned away, satisfied their prey had vanished into the sky, Steffi inhaled deeply, tasting the faint tang of jet fuel and excitement, and allowed herself a single, brief moment to imagine hope. A treatment protocol unapproved in the United States, but pioneered by Dr. Alain Moreau's team at Institut Pasteur, one that combined targeted antiviral infusions with a revolutionary form of immunomodulatory gene therapy designed to retrain Hayes' own T-cells to seek out and neutralize the blood-borne pathogen that threatened to define both his career and his life. She had watched countless research seminars, pored over late-night French-to-English transcripts, negotiated with regulatory agencies, and, most controversially, pushed for emergency travel clearance that would permit her son's primary surgeon to cross borders armed with his unique medical file. Now, as she settled into the plush leather seat, she caught Hayes' eye, young, fragile, haunted by memories of sterile hospital corridors and the acrid sting of contamination, and offered him a tentative smile that trembled with laughter unshed. "We're not in Los Angeles anymore," she whispered, voice thick with a cocktail of relief and dread, as the ramp retracted and the jet began to taxi. For his part, Hayes managed a nod that spoke volumes, a pledge of trust in his mother's fierce determination and in the team they would soon meet, and a vow to fight, to seize whatever sliver of life the scientists in Paris could provide. The flight passed in a haze of altitude sickness and exhaustion, punctuated by furtive glances at a small black-and-white photo taped to Hayes' forepole, a Polaroid of him grinning on a beach at Malibu, the ocean behind him a brilliant, unreachable blue. Steffi pressed a finger to the image whenever her gaze drifted, reminding herself that the boy in the photograph was still in there, waiting for a miracle. No fewer than 3 times, she wandered to the cabin's tiny kitchenette to refill his water cup or retape the portable monitor to his arm, each movement a prayer for the stable rhythm of his heartbeat. At one point, the captain announced they were crossing into Canadian airspace, and the shifting time zones rendered concept of day and night meaningless, pure white sky outside one window, the black void of upper atmosphere outside the other. In those suspended hours, Steffi relived every choice that led them here, the courtroom's harsh fluorescent glare, Finn's anguished testimony, Lee's placid yet cutting accusation that she had been a mother only in title while she hunted vengeance, the secret meetings with Carter and Ridge who had brokered a temporary truce to avoid diplomatic incidents with French authorities. Each recollection was a needle's prick of guilt or justification, but none of it mattered now. The only truth that counted was that she had gotten Hayes on this plane. When the jet's wheels screeched against the runway at Charles de Gaulle Airport just before dusk, the chill in the air carried a new electricity, an urgent, kinetic pull toward the city's heart where cobblestone streets and gas lamps still whispered of revolutions and scientists changing the world. Steffi helped Hayes from his seat, pliable as a rag doll in her arms, and navigated the corridors past bored customs officers and curious onlookers until they reached a discreet black sedan with tinted windows. The driver, a French-American liaison named Camille, greeted them in softly accented English and whisked them through lanes of traffic toward the 16th arrondissement, where Dr. Moreau's private clinic occupied the top 2 floors of a centuries-old Haussmann building. Steffi watched the Eiffel Tower's iron lattice flicker into electric life as they passed, its distant sparkle reminding her of the thousands of lives that would be illuminated by a single treatment's success or eclipsed by its failure. Inside the clinic, the antiseptic scent was tempered by bouquets of fresh lilies and jasmine, a deliberate choice by Moreau to fuse Parisian elegance with clinical sterility. They were ushered through a mausoleum of medical trophies. Anachronistic glass vials containing antitoxins, portraits of Pasteur himself, and a gleaming array of incubators and centrifuges behind plate glass walls. Moreau emerged from his office in a fitted lab coat, snow-white hair and steel-rimmed glasses making him resemble a kindly patriarch. His French accent rolled each E, each R, into a soothing balm, and he spoke of the treatment's mechanics with such conviction that Steffi found herself nodding even before she understood every syllable. Hayes's treatment would begin immediately, a high-dose antiviral cocktail administered via central line, followed by weekly infusions of CRT-ATMPs, chimeric antigen receptor T-cells engineered to target viral epitopes, plus a novel booster that harnessed messenger RNA to amplify the immune response. Risks are substantial, Moreau cautioned, fingers steepled, eyebrows arching beneath the clinic's soft glow, but without intervention, disease progression is almost certain. Here, we offer the frontier. You must decide if you dare to walk with me. Steffi, steeling her resolve behind red-rimmed eyes, laid a gentle hand on Hayes's forearm and spoke the two words that carried the force of a battlefield pledge, "We dare." The next hours bled into each other, blood draws in gowned isolation rooms, ultrasound-guided catheter placements, Ashton-dripping 4 bags hung from chrome poles. Steffi held Hayes's hand through every prick of the needle, every hiss of the syringe, every hiss of the dialysis pump quietly humming to clear his plasma before the CRT infusion. Occasionally, tears slipped free, and Hayes bravely squeezed her fingers, offering a ghost of a grin that said he understood this was their shot at rewriting fate. Between procedures, he drifted into feverish dreams, and Steffi stayed by his side in a fold-out chair, scanning French newspapers on her phone for any mention of their story, praying no sensationalist headline would jeopardize the fragile goodwill of the clinic's sponsors or the regulatory exceptions Moreau had secured. By the third day, initial results appeared promising, viral load readings plummeted, T-cell counts stabilized, and Hayes's fever broke. Moreau and his team gathered around a portable monitor, data streaming in real time, while Steffi inhaled with each new shade of green on the graphs, hope, not death, written in electronic ticks. Yet beneath every triumph lay the ever-present shadow of the 30% mortality risk Bill had once signed away to save his own son's life. Hayes's liver function tests showed mild elevations consistent with on-target effects, and Moreau warned of cytokine release syndrome, that storm of immune overreaction that could sweep Hayes off his feet faster than the virus itself. To guard against that, they administered tocilizumab and corticosteroids, balancing immunosuppression with the need to eradicate the pathogen. As Steffi watched the line chart level off, she wept, not from relief, but from gratitude so fierce it threatened to shatter her. In the quiet lull of midday, when the Seine shimmered below and distant church bells marked Parisian time, Steffi ventured onto the clinic's balcony with a steaming cup of coffee. Hayes, bundled in a white robe and fuzzy slippers provided by the staff, joined her, and they gazed out over slate rooftops dotted with chimneys and television antennas. Here, far from the legal battles and family feuds, life had distilled itself to two simple imperatives: breathe and survive. Hayes took a sip of coffee and grimaced at its bitterness, but laughed, his first real laugh since the diagnosis. Steffi sank onto a wrought iron chair, pulled him down beside her, and allowed herself to imagine the next time he'd swim in Pacific waves. But even in this moment of fragile peace, the specter of their old life loomed. Steffi's phone buzzed with messages from Ridge requesting updates, from Hope demanding reassurance that all was well, from Lee's lawyers pressing for recompense for reputational harm. She silenced each alert, promising herself that until they had defined results, full viral clearance, stable liver enzymes, patent gene insertion, nothing beyond this balcony mattered. Paris, with its centuries of art and revolution, offered them a chance to rewrite the ending of their story, to emerge from the crucible stronger, poignant proof that motherhood's devotion and medicine's ingenuity, when united, could defy the gravest odds. As dusk fell and golden gaslight bathed the city in warmth, a nurse summoned them back for the CART infusion. Steffi slipped on Hayes's gown, donned a mask, and held his hand through the final drip. Each drop of pink fluid that entered his vein was more than cells in suspension. It was a bullet fired in the war against disease, a testament to every legal risk and personal sacrifice that had brought them from California courtrooms to Parisian rooftops. The world beyond the clinic walls might still judge, threaten lawsuits, custody decisions, and professional ruin, but inside, where Steffi and Hayes stood side by side, the only verdict that mattered was the slow return of health, measured in pulsing veins and steady breaths. When the infusion pump finally clicked off, signaling the end of that stage, Hayes closed his eyes and exhaled a breath Steffi felt in her bones. She leaned down, kissed his temple, and whispered, "We did it." In that single moment, framed by the distant glow of Notre Dame's spire and the soft lullaby of the river below, they dared to believe that the blood-borne disease could be vanquished, that their flight across an ocean, the courtroom's thunder, and the strain of every heartbreak was converging toward a single triumph, life reclaimed, hope restored, and the unbreakable bond between mother and son proving more potent than any virus or verdict.